From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports Podcast. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in every week. This is episode 100. William,
can you believe that? We made it. We made it to three digits.
And in fairness, it's actually probably not episode 100. We've done more than 100 episodes.
Yeah,
in the official count, this is episode 100. So on a technicality, it's a big deal.
It's like what, the Gregorian calendar or something. Like technically it's a new millennium, but we might have skipped a couple in there. So
like really special thank you guys to those who have been with us from the beginning. Those of you who maybe just found the podcast recently, all the love we get, all the 5 stars and the ratings and reviews and messages and things, we really appreciate it. I got a message from someone actually just yesterday saying he just found it and he binged all like 99 episodes in the last week.
We get a lot of those, which is yeah. A, so flattering, and B, thank you for putting up with my kids screaming in the background in the early episodes.
It's actually pretty terrible. Those early days.
Production quality has come a long way since Paul and I met and decided, hey, we like video games and business. We should do a podcast. So.
Now, having said that, William, we did say we were going to do something big for our 100th episode, right?
We did, because we do have marketing in our hearts. So
yeah.
Yes.
And being a business podcast, we sort of have to follow through on that, right? Like we can't say we're just going to do something big, and well, we could, I guess. That might be good marketing.
Sometimes that works very well right, for businesses,
right, totally, not for us. Yeah. But no, so the plan, guys, for those listening and watching is we don't want to just go normal big. Right. The plan is to have a month-long celebration, essentially, of our 100th episode. Every week, we're going to have a huge guest, way bigger than our normal guests that we get on the show. And not only that, every single week, we're going to do a giveaway to thank our listeners, our hardcore fans, the people who love the show, who love the live stream, who tune in every week. We want to show you guys some love. We're going to do a giveaway. We're going to put the details on our social this week. So when you listen to this, it'll probably be up. But we're going to give away some cool stuff.
Yeah, it's coming.
Signed by the prophet, signed by the professor. You guys are going to get hopefully excited about some of the things we're going to give away.
I was just thinking, unless
copies of William's book.
Yeah, it's not just copies of my book. That was going to be the running joke. It would just be copies of the book.
Just giving away hundreds of copies of William's book.
They're in a warehouse somewhere. No, the book is done well. They're not in a warehouse. Well, there hopefully are still some in a warehouse somewhere. But yeah, but to kick it off.
I mean, we had to start big, right? We said we're going to do a whole month of huge. We have someone huge today on the show. Okay, this is none of.
Did I call in on the wrong day?
Pete, just go with us for a second here.
Yeah, let us do the drum roll for you.
Sorry, as you were, Paul. Sorry.
Yeah.
None other than Pete Hines. This is the most humble intro ever. I'm embarrassed to even say it. The Senior Vice President of Global Marketing and Communications at Bethesda Softworks. In 2 weeks, he's going to hit his 21st anniversary at the company. So he's a boomer in the gaming world. I guess we all are on this show.
Yeah.
But welcome, Pete. Welcome to the Business of Esports Podcast.
Thank you guys very much for having me. Congrats on 100 episodes. That's amazing that you've hit that milestone. And so congrats to you both on 100 or whatever the actual number is, 10, whatever. Yeah. Who's counting, really?
Who's counting? Look, I think
at some point we'll go back. We'll follow the Fallout numbering strategy. At some point, we'll just start putting years.
Just jump around. Like honestly, there's no real rhyme or reason. Like the next one could be like 406, and then you go back. Like is anybody keeping track anymore? Really?
I was trying to lobby Paul that we should number the episodes like Xboxes. Like we should just be like, it's S now. The next episode is S.
It's just
so like the next 10 episodes are all just called episode X. Like,
Yeah,
wait, is this the X from last week or this week? Which X is this one?
Because then you can celebrate as much as you want. Every
That's
episode
exactly
can
right.
be
That's
huge, right?
the strategy drive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pete, no, for those of you who, like the two people in the entire gaming industry who maybe don't know you, could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got to Bethesda, how you got into maybe gaming in general, just a bit sort of your path into the industry?
Sure. I am a graduate of Wake Forest University. Go Deeks. I got my MBA from George Mason University. I spent a few years early on doing PR, comms, marketing for a couple of different nonprofits, including the American College of Cardiology and the American Association of Blood Banks. I did on the side while also going to MBA school. Back when the internet was becoming a thing and video game sites started to pop up, started working as a video game journalist, a writer. I would review video games and interview folks for a couple of years on a site called the Adrenaline Vault. Don't look for it. It's not around anymore. And I had the opportunity to combine my many jobs into one back in 1999 when I joined Bethesda Softworks as their director of marketing and PR. And 21 years later, they still haven't gotten rid of me. So,
have they been trying, Pete?
They claim they have not, though. Okay. I still have my suspicions. But
yeah, 21 years though, we're gonna be able to cover some good gaming history because I have some questions about
a long time.
Some early titles in the lineage that define my childhood that we can chat about. But there is, of course, if you're listening to the podcast at all recently, there is a big business development that Paul and I are massive fans of, and we have not been shy about it.
It's the elephant in the room here.
The elephant in the room. Bethesda's acquisition by Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And so if it's okay, Pete, I'd kind of like to kick it off there and give you the floor a little bit to describe a little bit, if you can say sort of how the merger or the acquisition brewed. Was it a long time coming? Was it sudden? Sort of what was the history that led up to it? And then just a little bit about the strategic rationale from Bethesda's perspective about the acquisition.
I probably won't get into specifics on how long it was in the works, but obviously suffice to say, we have worked closely with Microsoft for pretty much my entire time at Bethesda. It's a company we know well. They were the ones who really gave us the incentive to change from just being a PC only developer, which we were when I started back in 99. We developed and made games only on the PC and decided to make the leap for a game called the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind for the original Xbox. And honestly, in part because at their urging, like, hey, this console could do the kind of games that you all make, and an RPG like yours could do pretty well on our system. And that was sort of the early days of what has become a 2-decade relationship between ourselves and a lot of folks over there who we very much like and respect. Chief amongst them, obviously, being Phil Spencer, in terms of his vision, how he sees the future of Microsoft, how we fit in that future, and how this acquisition can lead to a future for both of us that is sort of win-win-win, in that we get support and resources that allow us to make even bigger and better games with their help. If I've worked as a publisher who is a third-party publisher, and developers who have all had to be third-party developers for a very long time. The opportunity to join somebody and essentially be treated as a first-party developer and publisher is pretty darn appealing in terms of access to resources, or the conversations you get to have, not just in like, well, what do you need to make your game better, but like from a console support standpoint, from a systems level standpoint, are there things you need us to do? And again, we've been in this industry a long time, and so we hear the stories behind the scene about first party games that get certain features or special support from a Sony or a Microsoft, Nintendo to allow a first-party game to do something particular. And, you talk to our developers, that's pretty appealing. I think it's great for Microsoft as well, because I think we bring a lot of additional pedigree to an already very strong lineup and stable of developers. Look, I believe in walking softly and carrying a big stick, but I've been doing this for a long time. Like, hey, we're a pretty good catch. Like, we make a lot of really good games. We've made a lot of Game of the Year stuff and bestseller stuff, and in a variety of different genres. And if I take my Bethesda hat off for a minute, we're a pretty good get. And I think we ultimately make them better as a company to be a part of what they're doing. And the other win is, I think this will ultimately be a win for fans and for gamers, because at the end of the day, the thing that we have always believed first and foremost is, look, making games is a pain in the ass. It's hard. It's a lot of work over a lot of years. And a lot of people spend big chunks of their lives working on these games. And we spend a lot of money making them. And at the end of the day, we want as many people as possible to be able to play what it is we make. And Microsoft is very much in the same camp of, we want to help you get your games to the widest audience possible. Which means that people are going to be able to play our games, all over the place, not just on a specific console, not just on your PC, but what they do with xCloud streaming, and, streaming being something that we as a company have looked into and worked on some things there in terms of moving that forward as a viable technology that, sure, I'll have people playing Skyrim, Doom, Fallout, fill in number here on as many devices as we can. And so at the end of the day, I think it is a good cultural fit. I think it's a good philosophical fit. And I think it's a good fit where our strengths play well to their strengths and vice versa.
Yeah. So just following up on that, because there's another question I was sort of desperate to ask in this, which is, so you said, Bethesda's a good get, right? And totally agree. I mean, there are some incredible brands in the portfolio that Bethesda has, but also you guys weren't cheap. You were, the acquisition is
William, it's worth mentioning your benchmark, right? Because William has a benchmark on the
which is
my benchmark for acquisitions is Star Wars. When Disney bought Star Wars, that was like $2 billion, right? That's kind of my benchmark. So large acquisitions, I always sort of value in multiples of Star Wars. Yeah. So Bethesda, again, I mean, 3.5 Star Wars. Like, that is a lot of money.
Star Wars.
Yeah, that's a lot of Star Wars. That's actually more Star Wars than actually are films in the Star Wars mainline trilogy, So seriously though, like, just valuation, obviously, Microsoft's sophisticated buyer, you guys must have deserved it, but where is that value coming from? Is it the IP? Do you see the value in Elder Scrolls, Fallout, things like that? Is it the studios and the talent? Is it something else? Like, if Microsoft were going to say they're worth $7 billion for X, Y, and Z, what are the buckets the value is getting created in?
Well, certainly it's the things that you mentioned, right? We do have a lot of pretty strong IPs. Elder Scrolls is a massive brand for us. Fallout, Doom, Wolfenstein, we've got a lot of stuff that has value and legacy, right? And not stuff that we just came up with 5 years ago, right? Doom started and Wolfenstein started the popularity of, or the existence of, first-person shooters a really long time ago. So whether it's RPGs or first-person shooters, I do think we have very strong IPs. I also believe we have really good pedigree in our studios in terms of every studio that we have that is part of our company that we've shipped a game with has won at least one Game of the Year award for what they've made, except for one developer. And that's pretty impressive when you talk about a whole wide variety of studios in different locations, very different genres, actions, first-person sim stuff, really bloody, violent, kill Nazi stuff, kill demons, post-apocalyptic fantasy. We do a lot of different stuff. So I do think there's a lot of talent. I also think that, and I've heard Phil talk about this is he had a lot of respect for the fact that it's not just that we have talent, but that we're willing to take chances and try and push things forward and break ground, right? We didn't just participate in VR. Like, we were, a primary catalyst for VR becoming a thing with the technology that we figured out. And we've put out some VR games that are considered amongst the best that anybody has ever done. And we've also done some really cool stuff in mobile, like what we did with Fallout Shelter and something that nobody even knew we were working on, and then suddenly released. And now here we are 100 and whatever million users later, and it's still this phenomenon in streaming, which I mentioned before, where we have worked on things like our Orion technology and figuring out how to make streaming faster and better, both for the platform that's delivering it in terms of, reducing costs or being more efficient with the hardware, as well as making it a better experience for fans, that you can be farther away from data centers and have, a really good low latency experience. So and our culture, like I think that is important, right? He has spoken about this culture that we have of how we work together, how we work with others. Look, there's a lot of ways to make money in business. I think the right way to do it is trying as much as possible to be transparent, to communicate, to build and collaborate with your communities, to do things in a way that if somebody pulled back the curtain and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" that we would feel like there's nothing that we have to hide or be ashamed about. I think we go about things the right way. We turn square corners. And I think all of those things combined speak to not only what we bring, but also, again, I can say this because I know for sure he said it because I was on the podcast when he did, that Phil also knows about all of the things we have in development. And while we can rattle off a bunch of IPs of previous games, we also have a lot of really cool stuff coming up going forward. And I think all of those things point to the value that ultimately Microsoft saw in us. And certainly we believe in it, right? I know my chairman really well, having worked for him 21 years. I assure you, who wasn't trying to talk Phil down to a lower number. So, we believe in the value that we bring. We think, if that's our barometer, we're worth 3.5 Star Wars. I would love to go back and tell 18-year-old me that one day you're going to work for a company and help build it out of, very humble beginnings into 3.5 Star Wars franchises, just to see the look on my face. That's a pretty cool way of looking at it, William. I like that.
It's kind of insane, right? Look, being in the company must be even more insane to hear, but even as an outsider, it's a huge number.
Yeah. And believe me, the nerd in me squeals a little bit inside when I hear that. Like, come on, that's pretty damn cool.
But it's funny because I did this exercise actually with my class. So I'm teaching a class on esports and business of esports. And the exercise I did was, can we get to a number that sort of estimates what the lifetime value of an Xbox Game Pass subscriber is, right? And based on that number, how many Game Pass subscribers would Microsoft need to add to essentially justify a Bethesda acquisition? And you realize the number is not that large. Like, it's literally just a few million subscribers that you need to add that over their lifetime, come to that $7.5 billion kind of value. How important was sort of the Game Pass element, which William and I have been huge fans of in terms of a product from Microsoft? And it was recently announced that I think most of your properties will be part of the Game Pass offering.
And that Starfield was going to be on Game Pass at launch day one,
which is pretty incredible.
Incredible.
Actually, I'm not aware of another, and could be wrong, I'm not aware of another time a major IP like that has launched on Game Pass, right? I think this is a first moment. Was there?
Well, Microsoft has done it pretty consistently. Halo will be day one.
That's
the last
the
last Gears of War was. That's a pretty long-standing. But it's certainly a big deal. And the interesting thing about it, Paul, is that something like that even changes, I would assume, because I don't know, because it's not my job to figure out what the lifetime value is of a Game Pass person. They have people for that. But I would imagine we probably change that formula in some way, right? When you start adding in things like Starfield or whatever other future titles that we have, well, we're probably making a pretty good argument to stick around longer, not churn out of your subscription. And if we're helping your retention and so forth, like we're probably having some impact either on how many people are signing up or how long they're sticking around. If, well, I just got Starfield and I guess I should stick around because this next Bethesda thing is coming X period of time down the road and I want to play that too. And so certainly for Microsoft, I don't think there's any question. Like, you don't need me to tell you. Game Pass is a big deal for them, and they are absolutely crushing it. And this is only going to help them do even better, I would assume, once the deal closes and we can really start moving forward working together.
So I have to ask, because you're touching on all of our kind of hot button topics. So Games Pass, obviously, we're huge fans of. One thing I think Paul and I are maybe less bullish on today is the state of game streaming services. And I think part of that is maybe some of these have come to market before they were fully ready, or they've come to market with promises that the technology didn't necessarily deliver on. I think Stadia and negative latency is a good example of that. But my question for you is, it seems like you're really big on game, which I'm almost surprised by. What's driving the passion for game streaming game streaming services? And more importantly, do you think that enables a different class of game than Bethesda has been able to build in the past?
Good question. I'll try and take it in two parts. The first part is, I think the importance of streaming is twofold. Part of it is your existing players, right? And by existing players, I mean somebody who's gaming on a PC, somebody who has a console, one or more. I have a Switch, I have an Xbox, I got a PlayStation, and their ability to use streaming to further be able to play the kinds of things they love in a different way, right? I can play game X or Y while I'm at lunch instead of not being able to play it because I don't have my Xbox or PlayStation. It is also tremendous value in any number of ways and places in expanding the market to people who previously, like, they don't know what Doom Eternal is because all I play on is this, and Doom Eternal isn't available for this. So I'm not really checked in on Doom Eternal or like the Elder Scrolls or Wolfenstein because those things don't show up on my phone. But if streaming brings all of those kinds of experiences, obviously not just ours, all of them, to a bunch of people who previously, like, I don't have X $100 to drop down on a console up front. I can't build a gaming PC. There are large, underserved markets for those kind of things. But it turns out lots of people got a phone. And if you figure out how to take something and suddenly stream a much richer experience to those folks than they were previously used to, well, maybe Angry Birds isn't the top, or Clash Royale or whatever it is, isn't as far as they're going to go. Like, oh, I'll start playing these other things. I mean, we've seen that with Fortnite, right? Fortnite didn't become a global phenomenon just because it's super popular on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation and Switch. It's massive on phones. And so I think that sort of highlights, hey, there's a lot of people who will play something that you would normally only think about as a console game if you can get it to me in other ways. And streaming certainly is one of those ways.
And is international a factor there as well? Like, that's one of the big things I've wondered about for streaming services.
In particular, it is, yes. Where you have places like Russia, India, places with massive phone penetration and huge amounts of gaming on phones, but the penetration of consoles in some of those markets, like, it might as well be zero in some places where you can get those games on a phone. Suddenly you're changing that dynamic of what is the potential size of an audience for a really good role-playing game, whatever.
So gentle pivot here then, and Pete, to sort of a topic that's a little more germane to the name of our podcast, which is esports. Because I kind of want to cue off on something you're saying that's really interesting. So you're sort of saying, look, like, mobile, just because of the accessibility of mobile, right, and what it does in terms of incremental demographics, because a big theme of what you've said, whether it's Game Pass or the acquisition, was you want to get your games in front of as many people, right? So mobile, incredible vehicle to do that. Understand the value of that through streaming services. Here's the thing, though. esports as a category of game has become, I think, a very intensive experience. It's a very lean forward experience.
Mm-hmm.
And to date, we really haven't seen it cross over well into mobile. There are exceptions like Hearthstone, and hopefully at some point Magic Arena and things like that will come out for the phone. But in general, it seems like that class of highly intensive experience doesn't make it to phone well today. Is that a structural truth based on just the nature of the game and the intensity of it? Just like I wouldn't play professional soccer without putting on cleats. I'm going to need a PC if I want to play, you know, X esport. Or is it just, in your view, a state of where we are as an industry that esports are newer and therefore we haven't figured out how to cross them over into a medium like mobile?
It's probably some combination of those, William. I mean, I can't say for certain. I certainly don't consider myself an esports expert by any stretch. But I think it's probably a combination of those things. But again, I think what's really interesting is as the type of games you see on mobile changes, does the prevalence of mobile esports stuff also change? Right? When you're getting more, like, you no longer think about it as a PC game or a console game or a mobile game. It's just a game. And it runs on something that has a screen, which is essentially what streaming is ultimately trying to get you to. Right? I'm not saying it'll run on you just plug a CRT in and suddenly it plays anything. But, you know, eventually the idea is streaming doesn't really require a whole lot more than just, look, we're doing all of the rendering and the process and everything in the cloud. I don't need your phone to do anything other than render the thing that I'm sending to you. And so I think as the games get more sophisticated, and you start to see more things that you might be looking at more things that are on a mobile that are also a popular esport. Part of it also, William, I wonder if it's just sort of a skill level and a control thing, right? In terms of like people, you know, I watch esports with my boys. Like Overwatch League is one that we like to watch. And part of that is just like a skill thing, right? With what they're able to do. Well, it's a little tougher to show that off of a phone where, like, I don't know how you're doing what the people I watch on Overwatch League are doing when you're on a phone with, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't, if William, if you were like, hey, I'm going to play Overwatch on a phone, I would only be compelled to watch that because of the train wreck that was going to happen. Like, I can't wait to see how you're going to control your character and use all your abilities and ult while also paying attention to what's going on a screen this big. Like, that sounds like a garbage barge, and I'm in because I want to watch the
It's funny you say that, like, because I wrote a blog post like 2-3 years ago where I said this is one of the failures of mobile esports.
Right.
That's why it doesn't really make sense. But I want to take a twist on the esports thing, because Bethesda arguably and you know has IP that existed virtually at the beginning of esports, right? Like the
Quake.
first game I played competitively was Quake, right? And that I played for money was Quake 3, and it seems that that's no longer, or it feels like it's no longer part of the Bethesda strategy. Like, how important is esports and that those potentially very successful competitive titles, like how important are they to the future of the business? How much time's being spent sort of talking about those things?
It's a good question. I would say that it is when and where it makes sense. So, for example, we still have a Quake professional league, right? We're not trying to broadcast it on ESPN or ask for $50 million franchise fees or whatever, you know, but we still have a competitive thing. It runs year round. We have the world championships at QuakeCon like we always have. I think it is. I think it's important to us, but only where it makes sense and only where we think it's a natural fit. In other words, we don't view esports as, okay, for every game we are designing, we have to think about the esports aspect. Like at the end of the day, Paul, we're a video game company, and what we're interested in is making kick-ass games that don't feel like something you could get anywhere else.
Fair.
Right? That's what I want to do. I want something, when you play Doom Eternal, I don't really care whether or not it's an esport thing or not. That is the best first-person shooter you're going to play this year, period, full stop. In terms of action and skill and intensity, it's the best. Is it a fit for esports? Like, I mean, we've done some stuff with battle mode, but it wasn't designed or intended to be like a breakthrough esports title. It was intended to be an awesome shooter.
Fair, but like Quake has the DNA that Doom doesn't in esports, right? And
sure,
as a Quake lover, and I will tell you, hardcore Quake lover, there's
you
really
get
hard
him to shut up about how much you like Quake. Just say the word nail gun, and Paul's like, he doesn't immediately think of hanging pictures.
Yeah.
He's like,
No, it breaks my heart that it's not at the top of the esports heap where I believe it belongs, right? Like that this is the epitome of skill-based first-person shooters, right? That this is what separates the men from the boys. Like the Quake was the game that made skill in shooters a thing, right? And it breaks my heart that it doesn't occupy that place today. And I don't know. I guess my question is, I don't know if I have a question. It's more a complaint, but will it ever, right? Will it ever?
I certainly think it could. Yeah.
Of course,
it could.
Yeah, no question in my mind, it could.
And I would imagine, I mean, I will go out on a limb and say at some point we will make another Quake game. Like it's too good a franchise and too good an IP and too iconic a thing for us to just say we'll never making another one of those again. But I don't know how many years it will be until that happens. When it happens, maybe that's its moment to break out. I'm not really sure.
But the message is internally, esports is not driving any of the game decisions.
I think that's fair to say. Okay. And even if it's something that was designed for esports, at the end of the day, it should be a part of it. But I don't think it should drive the decisions in terms of like if you're making decisions based on whether it's an esport as opposed to does it make the game better or not. You know what I mean? Like usually tend to focus on what makes the best game possible. And yes, you want to think about spectator modes and all of those other things that enhance it. But at the end of the day, the game itself is going to determine whether you break through or not. People really like it, you got a shot. They don't like it, it doesn't really matter if you wanted it to be an esport or not. It's not going to be. Yeah. So I think, you know, it will be something that we continue to look at. And if we think there's a good fit, we will certainly consider it, but it's just not something you can force or say, we're going hell bent for leather to break in big into esports with X. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a lot of ways to be successful, and that's not how we think about it. I would rather make a shooter that just a lot of people love to play and kind of go from there.
It does make me a little bit nervous, though, Pete, just because I do think the challenge for esports and what separates it is they have to fundamentally be monetized as spectator experiences, right? Because otherwise you can't have teams and sponsorships and franchises if you need them. I mean, that's up in the air, but all those things, fundamentally, they're an eyeball-driven experience. And, you know, I think one of the challenges that I think Overwatch has had, for example, is a character like Tracer, you know, who's the emblem of the league. Incredibly fun to play. Teleporting is awesome when you're in control and you remember where you were and you drop the waypoint and you blink in and out. But as a viewer, it's like watching football and the quarterback, you know, jumps into the end zone. Like it's very tough. And so I would push back a little bit and say, I think there is actually a tension between designing games that are fun to play and games that are fun to watch.
That's fair.
Just like you would say there's a tension between games that are easy to play and games that have a high skill ceiling, right? And I think
that's fair.
One thing I think is a bit of a challenge in the industry today is we had to figure out that accessibility skill lever and get it to the right place over time. I still feel like that concept of watchability versus playability as a lever is something that's new and isn't being adopted. And I think it should, if that's the monetization model that people want to go down, right? But it sounds to me like you're sort of saying, no, we're actually happy monetizing the classic way, microtransactions, subscriptions.
Well, but again, in my example, what the stuff that I'm talking about, none of which is applicable to esports anyway, so it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? Like when we made Doom, it wasn't on the radar, so we just didn't spend much time. You know, we didn't spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about the esport aspect. Certainly, we think about the watchability aspect, but I just want to highlight: you can think about and focus on watchability without thinking about esports, right? Because you want a game that is fun to watch watch somebody else play, right? Whether it's Skyrim or Doom Eternal or whatever it is, like you can think about, hey, how easy is this to process if you're not the one playing and understanding what is this person doing on the screen? How do I follow and keep up with what they're doing, where they're going, what they're trying to accomplish? Like that is a thing, regardless of whether it's an esport. But your point is valid, right? I've experienced the Tracer phenomenon of what the hell did he just do? I've also experienced the phenomenon when I'm watching the DC Justice and I'm watching one of our players and he gets a couple of sweet kills, and then all of a sudden the camera switches to the other team, but I didn't notice, and I keep cheering, not realizing, oh wait, I'm cheering for the other team now because you switched teams and characters without telling me. And like, dude, this battle is frantic enough as it is, and trying to figure out what the hell is going on and whether or not we can get that one, crucial kill to tip the scales. And now you're jumping back and forth between, like, you're making my head hurt, dude. I'm old. I'm over 50. Like, there's only so much you can expect me to do at the end of the day to keep up if you're going to keep jumping around. So, you know what I mean? Like, I do empathize that. Yeah, that can be tough in terms of keeping up with who's doing what and what just happened.
Yeah, I hear that.
William, you had a great question on business lessons. I want to make sure we get to it.
Oh, why don't you ask it then? I've asked a lot. I have so many things I want to ask you, Pete. I feel like I could, bore you to death with my. But you should.
No, I mean, Pete, great. Your job is an interesting one because I think you get to be the mouthpiece for success and failure at the company, right? Over the years, and over 21 years, there's been both at Bethesda. Arguably, a lot more success than failure. A lot of what we try and do with the podcast for our audience is like teachable lessons, literally things they could take away, maybe apply to their own business. I'm curious what you took away from the whole Fallout 76 experience, like the dealing with the sort of the initial outrage, the aftermath of it. I'm curious that whole experience of Fallout 76 not living up to players' expectations. What would be the takeaways for our audience? Maybe any business lessons or anything they could apply in their own lives or businesses.
It's not fun when people are yelling at you. It's not fun when they're yelling specifically at you, not generally at you, meaning I work at the company. I mean, no, I'm yelling at you, Pete Hines. That is not fun, I assure you. It is also one of those adversity doesn't build character, it reveals a thing. That is when, as a company, you find out what you're really about. And by the way, I should point out, and you're sort of alluding to this, Paul, which is, well, it's not my first rodeo in having a launch where things didn't go exactly according to plan. Elder Scrolls Online, when we launched it on PC, it didn't have, the exact reaction you would have hoped. There were some issues and some challenges, and we had to put in a lot of work. But there's a variety of different ways that you can deal with those things. And we very much are a company and a culture that says, if we believe in this thing, just because it doesn't go well doesn't mean we're going to quit, right? Like, are we going to fold up tent and say we tried it and it didn't work and oh well, and move on and just give up entirely? Or are we going to say, I got it. Some number of you don't like this, but some number of you do. And there's a lot of things that could make this game better, and they're all on us to do. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make the game better and make it as good as we know it can be. And it's not going to take a day, and it's not going to take a week, and it's not even going to take a year. But you either commit yourself to doing that, or you're in the wrong business, as far as I'm concerned. If you're going to quit just because things don't go well, then that's not the sort of folks that I enjoy working with, right? Yeah. And you never want things to not go well, but you really know what you've got, and you really know who you're working with when that kind of stuff happens. And again, it's not that people aren't frustrated or that they aren't upset. And by people, I mean inside the company, right? It's not like we're like, oh, it'll be fine. Like, no, it hurt. It's not fun to disappoint people. It's not fun to let them down. It's not fun to make them angry. But we collectively said, we're still going to do this. Whatever it takes, we're going to make this work. And, I think it took until the Wastelanders launch earlier this year before people really went, okay, like, here we go. I got NPCs, I got meaningful dialogue, I got factions. Like I have all the things that I really wanted in a Fallout game that weren't in this at launch. But hey, now you're on a track that I can really get into and wrap my head around and enjoy. And there's nothing to it but hard work. That's it. You know what I mean? And and a lot of what I've gone through in my life that prepared me for that stuff was things like, I've played soccer since I was 5. It wasn't much longer after I started walking that my dad had me kicking a soccer ball. It's what I love to do. And a lot of what I learned from playing sports is what I apply to business, which is rarely, if ever, can you do it by yourself. You got to have a whole group of people working together with the same ideals and the same beliefs. And again, look, it takes skill, right? You can have the nicest people in the world. My dad is a wonderful man and a great human being, and you should never put him anywhere designing or programming a video game. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing, right? So it's not just nice people. You got to have talent. You got to have ability. But most of all, you got to be a team. You have to have each other's backs. You have to understand that, look, shipping a game that doesn't go over well is not all that different than going on a bad losing streak, right? And I've been on teams where the chemistry wasn't great and people start pointing fingers at each other and the defenders are going, well, our forwards can't score a goal to save their life. And the forwards are like, well, it doesn't matter if we can score because you guys can't guard anything and we give up 7 goals a game. You know what I mean? Like that's one way for it to go. And the other way for it to go, and my experience when I played, and served as sort of a captain or a leader on a lot of teams, is to grab people by the collars and to grab them by the shirt and go, hey, knock it off. We're going to do this. I didn't come out here and bust my ass so that we can get our asses handed to us and be embarrassed. I got some pride. And I think you have some pride too. And we're better than this. And we're going to figure out how to do it. And I think that's, as a company, kind of what our philosophy has been. That's why I've been at Bethesda as long as I had, because I found a lot of other people who thought and act in the same way, which is you don't quit when the going gets tough.
The Fallout 76 was particularly surprising to me, the response to it most recently. And I'll give you the example, which actually sort of ties completely to exactly what you're saying. I watch Shroud, right, pretty frequently on Twitch. And Shroud, just I think like a week or two ago, started playing Fallout 76. Like he installed it and I think he did a couple of streams where he was playing it. And I'm going, geez, this is weird. Like I thought this game was dead, right? Like I don't think there's that many players. And as I watched him play it and I watched him sort of talk over it, he's going, oh, wow, yeah, they fixed this. Oh, yeah, they fixed this, right? Like he seemed content that a lot of things were addressed that he complained about earlier on. And I think what surprised me is, I stepped back and I asked myself, why did Bethesda bother fixing any of this, right? Like, there can't be that many players for Fallout 76 anymore, I wouldn't think.
Oh,
right?
You'd be sorely mistaken in that regard. But it's one of those things where it's very popular, or it was very popular to talk about that game sucks and nobody plays it because it's an easy thing to say. I assure you, we would not be doing this if there weren't lots of people playing the game.
I guess, Pete, maybe then I gave the company lots of credit because I said, look, they fixed this even if no one's playing it, right? There was so much pride in the game that they still fixed it. They still took the time to do it, which I thought was cool.
Of sort of like fix versus build again, right? And that tension in games development. I think that's interesting. But I have another topic I'm desperate to get in, Pete, because this is one that I think is our most asked listener question about business models in gaming. And I have to kind of lob this one over to you. And it's in-game advertising, right?
Okay.
And particularly because I think of, how I'll just come right out and say I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan. I have been since Daggerfall, like if anyone remembers Dagger. I think that might have been from before your time, Daggerfall.
It was. Yep.
Yeah, because that would still be Interplay, right? I think when the franchise.
No, it was still us, but it was 96.
Yeah.
So it predated me by a few.
that was probably the first RPG that I ever really liked. But anyway, aside, but one of the things I think a hallmark of Bethesda titles across the spectrum, whether it's Fallout or Elder Scrolls or whatever, is very immersive worlds. At the same time, there's a lot of talk in the industry about the power of in-game advertising, injecting Coke ads, right? And it's done sometimes even in places where it doesn't necessarily, where you'd be surprised. I mean, the example that stuns me right now is I'm playing Death Stranding and seeing the ads for Norman Reedus's ride on AMC every time you take a shower in that game, right? Like, how does Bethesda think about an opportunity like in-game advertising? And is it high of interest? Yes, let's get more monetization for the title. Not at all. We're never going to touch it. Like, what's the thinking there?
Well, so far we've never touched it. I mean, again, I'm almost there. 21 years. We've never embraced it. First of all, like, we'll get it the hell away of anything where it would make no sense, right? What is your ad doing in the Elder Scrolls? What is your ad doing in Fallout? That's not an ad for something that should exist in the world.
Bottle caps, you're okay. Yeah.
Or Doom Eternal or Wolf. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at the stuff that we do, or Dishonored or Prey, or Evil Within, like, if you go down the list, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't think we make the kind of things, if I made a sports game, if I made basketball or football, and you're used to seeing a field or a court where there's ads on the side, like, well, yeah, like, there's always ads on the side. What difference does it make whether we make them up or they're legit? Like, you're not harming the integrity of the game either way. I think in virtually every situation you would look at least for the things that I've been around for, it would make zero sense, and it would be really noticeable and a bad feel. And I'd rather not.
And this is actually interesting just for the listeners, because I think, like, your response is exactly why I'm extremely not bullish on in-game advertising. Is yes, there's a lot of assets there. Yes, there's a lot of places you could put things. And yes, I'm sure there's great tech to inject it. But, like, publishers just don't want it. It's too antithetical to the game experience. And it's interesting to hear you state it so strongly. Normally, people dance around it a little bit. And they're like, oh, well, we might consider it. But you're essentially like, look, it's just, if it doesn't make the game better, we're not going to go in that. It's a risk. Why would we touch it?
Exactly. Although, again, I do have the benefit of, well, our developers keep making worlds where none of that stuff would make sense. So it never gets broached in the first place, right? It's pretty easy, like, when you do stuff like the Elder Scrolls, where there is no universe in which you could realistically figure out how to put a Coke ad in that game where it wouldn't be the worst thing you've ever seen. So I kind of get off easy. Like, I don't have to fight anybody on, no, we're not going to do this, because nobody wants to do it. You know what I mean? As opposed to more modern, grounded, present day stuff, which, again, like, we just don't do a lot of those kinds of things. So it never really comes up.
Yeah. Pete, a bit bigger picture, just as we zoom out here. What is the thing you're most excited about in the industry? You've been at Bethesda 21 years. What is the thing or things or trend that gets you really excited about the next 5 or 10?
It's a good question. I mean, I'll be honest with you. The thing that always, this is going to sound like a really stupid, selfish answer, but whatever. What gets me most excited is the stuff that I see that we're doing. Right? Like, it's not about, is streaming going to be big or not big, or how big is VR, or is this technology or that technology going to be thing? Over my career, there is so much stuff that was nouveau, right? For a while, like, I remember this phase where casual games for the Nintendo platform was the huge thing, right? Everybody was just spitting out, what games are we making for girls, or what are we doing for moms? And we need this whole casual gaming thing for this stuff. And we looked at that and, like, no, thank you. That's not what we do. And then Facebook gaming was this huge phenomenon, and everybody's like, oh, Facebook games. And we were like, yeah, we're not doing that. That's not who we are, and that's not what we do. Like, we know who we are. We know the kind of stuff that we make. We find new ways to expand what that means and to sort of wade into new territories, right? It's not like we are known for a mobile game like Fallout Shelter, or anybody would have expected that from us. But I would think what they would expect is, we're going to try some stuff, and we're going to do some things, and we're going to try zigging when other folks zag, if we think we got a chance to do something unique or different. And so what I'm most excited about is the stuff that I see from our developers in terms of finding new ways to engage our players, to do things that are a little different. Look at something like Deathloop that we're doing. It's a PS5 exclusive with Sony from Arcane Leon. It has a lot of what
my favorite studio, I think, in the Bethesda portfolio.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
those guys are. Yeah.
They do amazing stuff, and if you look at what you would expect from an Arcane game, there's so many of those things in Deathloop, right? That the world is very realized. There's a reason why everything is where it is. It's a very systems-based game, meaning we don't script a lot of what's going to happen. We just throw stuff into the world in this big toy box and go, good luck. Do this however you want. Be quiet. Go in guns blazing. However you want to approach it, go nuts, have fun. So it has a lot of that. But then they're like, hey, we really love the idea that the main bad guy, or in this case, bad girl, bad woman, can be played by another person. That you can allow somebody to come in and to play as Juliana, trying to stop you as you're going through trying these assassination missions and finishing quests, that she can be in the game as an AI thing, and it's still a single player thing. But it's really interesting that you could invite your friends or other folks and rise to the challenge of, can you beat this mission if that's being played by a human who ostensibly is going to be way better than the AI would be, right? And as we played the game, and I played once with just the AI as Juliana, and I played one way, and then I started making very different decisions when I played it with a human player, because I was like, well, if I do this, I know that player is going to hear that explosion, and I'm telling them exactly where I am and how I'm moving through the level. So I'm not going to do that thing I did last time. Whereas with the AI, you're like, oh, the AI is not going to know that, that explosion. You know what I mean? Like, oh, come on, AI doesn't work like that. But with the human, yeah, they see and notice everything. And the tension there and the challenge of it almost made it feel like a very different game and a very different mission than this exact same mission was with AI. And so I think looking for new ways to evolve gameplay like that is what I get excited about. And just seeing where our teams are headed next with the kind of things that they want to make and do.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited about that, because I love Dishonored, but I think one of the challenges in that title was replayability of the levels. Like, after you achieved a level of mastery, that was sort of it. You kind of knew where to go and what to do. And I think it's a very interesting addition in that regard. But
I love that self-awareness, though. Like, as a studio, as a developer, as a publisher of games, like, to me, that's somewhat unique these days. You see a lot of studios trying to ride waves, right? Everyone wants to do a BR game now, right? BR for the last few years has been the thing. Everyone needs a battle royale game now. And I think you guys have, interestingly enough, stayed away from the clear trends, but sounds like with a very clear sort of self-awareness of who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah, I think we know who we are. I mean, again, look, we're not immune to it, right? The team felt like it was a pretty cool thing that might work in Fallout 76 as a standalone mode, and they added it as a free update for folks who wanted to play the game. And it does some different things. It feels very much like a Fallout version of a battle royale. It's not trying to compete head-to-head with, Apex Legends or Fortnite or what have you. But yeah, it goes back to my previous point. Like, we don't just see a thing become popular and suddenly we got to do whatever it takes to go running towards that thing because it's all about that now. Like, well, if it's not what we're about, or it's not something that we're passionate about making, then why would you bother? Why would you try making something only because that's what you think everybody else wants? If you're not making it because you care about it and you're passionate about it, it's probably not going to be all that good. Like, at the end of the day, you got to make stuff your devs want to get up and make every single day. Because, like I said, it's a really long road. It's years and years of really hard work. And you're not going to get there by doing something that somebody else thinks is a good idea. And you would rather do anything than go in and make art for that game. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So that's really interesting. But that actually goes to the last question I really want to ask you, which is, you said you're right. Games are a massive process, 4 or 5 years for some of these titles, sometimes longer if you hit a snag. I'm just curious, and I would love to hear from your perspective about the moment of inception for these things. So, your Bethesda, you're planning now for, I'm guessing, 2025 or 2024 or something, and you have a slot in your line planning equivalent for new title, right? Mm-hmm. And that could be anything. That could be Fallout 7. That could be a totally fresh IP. How does that process get handled? That the big new tentpoles, like what's that moment where the big new tentpoles get played?
Well, so here's the thing. I'm just making sure that like my chairman is not going to be like, "You're an idiot. What are you doing telling people?" But I think this is all fine because it's not rocket surgery. I love that expression. We tend to focus more on what is the idea and who's making it, right? We don't say 2024, what are we putting out? I think it's the wrong way to go about doing it because you've already put an arbitrary constraint on it. You've said it can't take any longer to make than this. What if you have the best idea in the world and it's going to take longer than that? Are you not going to make it? So we tend to focus more on who's making it, why is this a good fit for what they do, and why are we excited about the idea? I will tell you, William, this is a thing, we used to do a lot more third-party publishing than we do now, right? We've got a pretty healthy stable of studios that we work with, and so here and there we've done some third-party stuff. Rage 2, for example, was third-party with Avalanche as the developer. But by and large, it's a lot of internal stuff. But back when it was external, and developers would come to pitch us their ideas, and they were, doing all this stuff that used to drive me crazy, right? They were basically trying to write like the bullet points in the back of the box. And I would always interrupt them and go, stop. I don't need you to do my job for me, okay? What I need you to do is sell me on why I want to play your game. If you get me excited about it, I will go get everybody else excited about it. You only got to sell one copy. You got to sell me. If you sell me on why I want to play your game, if you sell me on why it's fun and why it's cool, I'll figure out what the bullets are. I'll figure out the text. I'll figure out all that stuff. Don't write like what you think are the key buzzwords you think need to be on the back of the box, like multiplayer or co-op or like it. Are you any good at making co-op? Does that have anything to do with the game you're making? Then why the hell is it in this presentation, right? You're just doing it because everybody else is saying, well, you can't do a game anymore without multiplayer. You can't do it co-op. Oh, bullshit. Like, is your game important for those features or not? Because if it's not, then get it the hell out of here. Because at the end of the day, one thing that I know for sure and that we've learned is focus is so important. Focus is crucial. You can do anything, but you can never do everything. And the more things you try and do, the less good they're probably going to be. And you tend to make games a lot better by subtraction, not addition. Very few games get better because you keep adding features to them. They get better when you start to realize, you know what, the time and effort we're putting into this feature, it's just not turning out as good as we thought. Let's cut it. And we can take all the time we would have spent polishing that, fine-tuning it, and put it into these other things that we know could get even better if we spent even more time on them. So you go sort of from this to this, right? And that is really, I think, where the secret sauce is, which is if you get a developer who's got an idea and they say, look, at the end of the day, it's about this. You're this guy who looks like this big meathead who is all about killing Nazis. But at the end of the day, he's a pretty simple guy. All he wants is to go home to a quiet house with a white picket fence and live out his life without worrying about Nazis ruling the world and screwing everything up. And that's what BJ Blazkowicz is about. And in this game, you're going to be this guy and do this. And I'm like, done. I'm in. Let's do that. Giddy up. I don't ask, is it going to have online or what about this or what about that? Like, I want to know what is the thing that makes me go, oh, I can't wait to play that game. Because once I'm excited, then that's where I can start to come up with and work with teams. Because obviously, I'm not coming up with most of this stuff anymore. I have teams of people who come up with, how do we market Wolfenstein? Why is Doom Eternal cool? Why is Starfield going to be a game you want to play? But when we get excited, we know how to take that excitement and bring it to a wider audience and get other people excited. Show them the game. Show them what you're making. And they're going to decide on their own, that's a game I have to play. Because one of the things I feel like I do that is a little bit different or very different depending on who you talk to is I don't believe it's my job to convince anybody. I don't believe it's my job to convince Paul or William, you need to play Deathloop. Because I don't think that I can. Like, I don't treat consumers like idiots that I just have to trick or I'm going to make up their minds for them. Gamers are smart people. They see through the bullshit. That you can't fool them. You got to be true and honest to what you're making and why it's cool and fun. And if you show them stuff that you think is going to it gets you excited about playing the game, chances are they'll get excited as well if it's the kind of game they want, if it's the kind of game that they're looking for, right? But it's sort of that idea of you got to be respectful to your consumers. You can't just treat them like, you make a cool box front and they're going to go, oh, guy with cool gun, I should play that. Like, nobody buys games like that. And by the way, I don't think that they ever have. I think you do much better by taking the core of what's fun about a game and showing it in a way that other people will connect with, and they will come to their own decision whether or not that's worth their time, that's worth their money, whatever it is you're asking them to part with.
Very cool. Pete, I have my last question for you.
Okay.
It's near and dear to my heart. Okay. I've been a lifelong hardcore PC gamer.
Okay.
To the point, I would say I'm a little bit of a console and mobile hater. And as you know, that puts I would argue two companies have been sort of my sweethearts for the last 20 years, right? It's like Bethesda and Blizzard, more than anyone, I would argue, created some of the most breaking PC games.
Sure. That's a good two to pick.
And the way I see sort of things going, and every 5 years people say the PC gaming's dead because such and such comes along, and these console generations super powerful now, or we have game streaming to your phone now, and right, like every so often you hear PC gaming is dead. How important is PC gaming to Bethesda still, right? Knowing that really was the DNA of the company early on. How important is it? And do you think there's any credence in the next 5 to 10 years to the sort of the PC gaming is dead crowd?
It is very, very important to us, and I would give no credence to that whatsoever. PC
Even
gaming,
with the Microsoft sort of acquisition, although they're fans of
PC gaming is not going. PC gaming is not going anywhere. Look, I think what Microsoft is trying to do, and again, I'm not Microsoft, at least not yet. I'm not part of Microsoft, so I wouldn't know for sure. But I'm saying just as an external party who's viewing what they do, I don't think they're trying to force you to drop your gaming platform of choice to embrace theirs. They're simply trying to widen it, right?
Yep.
There's Game Pass is, hey, whatever it is, Xbox, PC, you can play stuff on this. Like, well, then PC gaming, how is it going anywhere? Because the stuff that's in Xbox Game Pass, I can play on my PC. So I don't think they're trying to get anybody to go away. I think they are simply trying to broaden it beyond what those platforms can already reach, right? They know how to reach the PC folks. They put games up on Steam. They make them available through Xbox Game Pass for PC. They're doing plenty to reach out to the PC gamer. I don't think it's going anywhere. It's always going through some amount of evolution. I mean, here's the perfect thing, Paul, which is, do you remember how long we went without Microsoft Flight Simulator?
Yeah,
where it used to be massive, right? Like every year when Flight Simulator came out, it was a huge deal, and you had the giant manuals and people who were super into it loved it. And then it went away for 13, I wasn't even paying attention, but it seemed like forever.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it came back, explosive. People can't get enough of it, playing Flight Simulator left and right.
Yep.
So I think as a platform, it's probably doing just fine, and is going to be doing it's doing way better than just fine. It's doing very well, and it's going to continue doing very well for a long time. Whether it's because, I mean, look, my kid is 17. He plays stuff on Xbox. He plays stuff on Xbox with me. He plays with his friends, but he loves playing PC games. So does my 21-year-old. He loves playing PC games. They love playing PC games together. They could play anything. You would think that they'd be prime candidates to be like the console generation where they only played on console. Nothing could be farther from the truth. They play on console. They play on PC. They play on their phones. They play on everything. And I think that's going to continue. Interesting.
Pete, look, it's been such a pleasure having you. Is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with? Any thoughts, any any interesting sort of insight maybe into the future of Bethesda? Anything you want to plug? I know there's nothing to plug. You guys just got bought for.
I mean, there's always something to plug, but that's not really my. That's not. No, it's not my style. No, I mean, first of all, again, thank you both for having me on for the 100th episode. It's an honor to join you. It's super fun talking to you. Congrats on all your success and all your future success. I think it's an exciting time for us at Bethesda. I've spent a lot of time internally talking to employees and giving my own perspective on this deal, why I think it's so good for us, why I'm so excited about it, why I'm so excited for the next chapter of Bethesda Softworks, because that's what this really is. It's us moving to a new chapter. And I think ultimately this will lead to an even better version of Bethesda than would have been possible had we stayed on the path that we were previously on. And I don't think there's really a limit to where or how high we could go working with Microsoft. So I'm super excited. I'm excited for our employees. I'm excited for our fans. And mostly I'm excited for the games that we're making and hopefully that both of you will be playing in the future. And as we show more, I hope you get even more excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And just to say, Pete, I know it's probably not in development, just a gentle nudge. Fallout Tactics 2, it could happen, right?
Let me just write that down real quick on the laundry list that I get from Twitter.
I know, yeah. I'm just
10,000. Hey, you should make X. So let me just make a note of that real quick.
Gears of War.
We tried to get Strauss Zelnick to leak GTA 6 when he was on the podcast, but he would not. So we've given up on trying to.
So does that mean you're not sure whether they're going to make a GTA 6?
It's up in the air. The history is no guide to whether or not.
Who knows? Who knows if they'll take the risk of making a GTA 6? It could all go horribly wrong for them. What if it only makes $3 trillion in the first week? They would be gutted.
Yeah. No. It's heartbreaking.
Pete, again, I just want to say thanks for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Pete, it's been such a pleasure. Look, and for our listeners, look, I don't even know how we're going to beat this. We're going to try to give you a month of really cool guests. Pete, you've set a bar that I don't know if anyone else is going to meet here. And for our listeners, please stay tuned for giveaway details every week again for the next 4 weeks. Thank you, Pete, for being on the podcast. William, thank you as always. For anyone listening, leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Tell your friends about the podcast. Spread the word. That's how this has grown. We really appreciate you guys tuning in every week. And on that note, we will see you guys next week.